Hello and welcome. I'm Liz Booker, literary aviatrix, and I am excited to talk with the author of the March 2025 Aviatrix Book Club discussion book, Solo to Darwin. Fewer than 10% of pilots and aircraft mechanics are women. These are their stories of tenacity, adventure, and courage. Stories with the power to inspire, heal, and connect. Welcome to the Literary Aviatrix community, where we leverage the power of story to build and celebrate our community and inspire the next generation of aviation. Amanda Harrison, welcome.
Hi, Liz.
I'm so excited to talk to you. We have so much to talk about this book and about your flying career. For anyone who hasn't had a chance to read it yet, can you give us a synopsis and maybe do a reading?
Yeah, sure. So my book is called Solo to Darwin. The title has had to stick with me, but it's basically my attempt to emulate the amazing Amy Johnson, who was the first woman to fly from the UK all the way down to Australia in 1930 in only 19 days. So that was an amazing feat, and I was ambitiously thinking that I could do that, emulate her flight and try and do it in my own Tiger Moth. So that's what it's all about.
That's part of what it's about. I think there's definitely some notable themes in there that we're going to get to. But before we do, it is a very tight memoir of this particular experience with some allusions to some other things that you had gone through in your life. But what I would love to hear more about before we get into this particular story is sort of your path to aviation. There's a brief reference to you having been a medic in the Army. So tell me about yourself.
Yeah, I think I'm a sort of like a mix. I'd like to say that I'm a cocktail. I'm shaken but not stirred. So I've got a lot of things in there. And like you say, you wonder what to do. The book is about is the diarise of the actual adventure, but then you need a bit of the backstory of how I got into aviation and what I did and why I did it. So my dad inspired me to fly in the first place. He built remote control models, and he built me a Paddington bear flying on a marmalade sandwich when I was young. So that was just awesome. And he was just the most amazing guy in the world. And he's no longer with us. And I actually go into the grief side of things, writing the book. And I think actually writing the book helped me sort of come to terms with that grief, because I'm talking about him without crying now in this year. But yeah, and I suffered. So I always wanted to just be a private pilot. I am just a private pilot. That's all I ever wanted to do. And all I've ever wanted is the next step. And it's kind of like, and then you suddenly find yourself planning to fly to Australia in a Tiger Moth. So I only ever try and take the next bite of the elephant. But as you do that, I achieved my PPL, and I was kind of like, oh, what could I do now? Then I achieved my CPL. Then I achieved flying a jet. Then I achieved flying the Tiger Moth. And suddenly your horizons get bigger and bigger, and you start to try and bite off more of the elephant. And that's what I do. But the Army was funny, because I went round Freshers' Fair at university. I was what they call a mature student. So I'd already left home, and then I went round there. I went back to university to study, and I went around the Freshers' Fair looking for a job, and I bumped into the Army guys. And they said, well, yeah, we pay, and I said, yeah, but there's no flying in the Army. And they said, yeah, there's helicopters and all kinds of stuff. And I was kind of, oh, okay, fair enough. Anyway, so I went along, I joined up, and as soon as I signed on the dotted line, it was kind of like, would you like to be a secretary or medic? And I was kind of like, what happened to the flying?
Yeah.
So I ended up being a medic, because me secretary, and I'm also dyslexic. So that's also part of the book as well.
Oh, interesting. And you mentioned your commercial pilot. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I, again, never thought I could be a commercial pilot. I didn't have the brains, I didn't have the money. And I was studying for my IMC, which is like your cloud rating, after I got my private pilot's license. And then my job folded. So I walked into the club all despondent and went, oh, I've got to give up my lessons for a while. And they said, oh, go commercial. And so after I'd picked myself up off the floor laughing, I thought, okay, well, I'll just do the first step. I'll get the class 1 medical. If I get that, then maybe I'll do some of the studying, the ground school. And if I pass all of that, then maybe I'll do the flying. And if I pass all of that, then maybe I'll think about getting a job. And I've timed my aviation perfectly. Now, I know the sarcasm is different in America and UK, but my flying, I learnt when it was 9/11 in my PPL, so therefore there was a lot of different changes in the flying world. Then I
Right.
did my commercial in 2007 when the big worldwide financial crash. So I did get in holding pools for airlines, but nothing happened.
Mm.
And then I was on my captain. I worked my way all the way up to flying private jets. I loved it doing charter jets, and I was flying a Citation XLS, which is, I say, the Ferrari of the jet world. I loved it. Didn't have any auto throttle, so we had to fly it. And I was allowed to hand fly it quite a lot, which is just amazing. And then I was booked on my captaincy course on the 24th of March, and we shut down in this country on the 23rd of March in the COVID 2020. I timed my career perfectly. So at the
Oh,
moment,
wow.
I'm not doing any commercial flying. However, from this adventure and from writing the book and other things, I'm now part of the sort of Amy Johnson project and the Fly Festival project, which is inspiring youngsters and doing all the STEM activities. We've got a massive weekend coming up because it's the 95th anniversary of Amy Johnson leaving Croydon Airport. So I've suddenly, life has taken another sideways step into a different world, but I love it. I love inspiring, people. So if that's where my life is going, and hopefully this year, might not achieve it this year, but I'm hoping to go for my display authorization.
Your display authorization?
Yeah,
What
so
does
that
that mean?
that means you can fly in air shows
Ah,
and
okay.
do displays.
Okay, wonderful. Oh, that's so cool. So, just say a little bit more about this Croydon event. When is it and what's involved?
So it's the 3rd of May, and it's
Okay.
down at the Croydon Airport Hotel, which is next to the Croydon Airport Tower. Now,
Okay.
Amy Johnson left from Croydon Airport, which was the first commercial airport in this country, and she left in 1930. And the tower building still remains. It's that beautiful Art Deco period when it was, and that's survived. The runway and the airfield is long, long gone, but the actual building still survives. And they have a massive exhibition about Amy Johnson, and they're all on board with it. So um, we're calling ourselves the Amy Angels, but that's only our sort of our little joke. But there's Jenny Lockyer, who's done a one-woman show all about Amy Johnson. There's Jane Delamere, who is, as I say she's the Amy Johnson expert. She says she's not, but she's doing a master's in heritage and is on the tracking down Amy Johnson's bones because she tragically died in the World War II. And then there's me, who's talking about my adventure on the flying side of things. And there's going to be tours of the airport tower so that they can show you all Amy Johnson's side of things. There's going to be somebody who's rebuilding an Oxford Air Speed, which is the aeroplane that Amy tragically died in. So it's going to be a really exciting event. Everybody's welcome. It's just donations if people want to buy tickets. So things like that. Good.
Oh, well, I wish I could come. I'm so excited about that. And I'll say more about why as we move along. But I want to hear, how did you learn about Amy Johnson, and why did that inspire you?
Yeah, so Amy Johnson, I learned about all these amazing people when I was learning to fly, and I bounded up to somebody who had a Tiger Moth when I was actually learning to fly. I did a bit of air racing, so I was navigating air racing, and there was this wonderful Tiger Moth, and it was beautiful. It's this biplane, and it sat there with its nose in the air, looking all this, very sort of royal. And I went up to the owner and I said, "Wow, what kind of airplane is that?" And he very kindly gave me a little flight in it. And he said two things. If you want to learn to fly these airplanes, you've got to learn how to start them because they're what we call hand swung. So you literally grab hold of the propeller and pull it round until it starts. And then you've got to learn the history of it. And it was the history that took me to Amy Johnson. But I learned about all these amazing people who flew these airplanes in between World War One and World War Two, like Sir Alex Henshaw and Lady Mary Heath and Lady Mildred Bruce. And they just, "Oh, darling, you'd just buy your aeroplane in Harrods and somebody would teach you how to fly it and you'd fly down to Africa." So Lady Mary Heath actually took her fur coat so she wouldn't get sunburnt while she was in her moth down to Africa. Amazing stories. But they all had this thing of, they were titled and their butler would be stationing their oil halfway down, and
Right.
that's how they did it. And I thought, okay, that's fair enough. I can't do anything like that. And then I stumbled across Amy Johnson, and there's this amazing book by Midge Gillis, who wrote about Amy Johnson. Fantastic book. And yep, that one there. Absolutely.
Amy
Queen of the Air.
Johnson, Queen of the Air. I have not read it yet, but it is
Yeah.
on my list.
And I would say that's the definitive one to read. And
Okay.
I read it and I just went, wow, she was an ordinary person. And guess what? I'm an ordinary person. And she set out to do an extraordinary thing. And that's it. I'm just an ordinary person that did an extraordinary thing. So she inspired me. She did it from when she said she was going to do it to when she did it in 6 months or 5 months, sort of taking off. It took me about 15 years to actually get my airplane, buy it, and do all the rest of it. And this is it. I was always talking about it. I was always going on about it, and everybody, oh yeah, Amanda, you're talking about Amy Johnson again. And it wasn't until I had breast cancer and then my dad actually died that I thought, right, I hadn't been able to find a sponsor. I don't know why. I'd written hundreds of letters and just not got a sponsor. And then after the breast cancer and my dad dying, I thought, wow, breast cancer's tried to kill me. So I might as well throw everything at it and just do it myself, which is what I did.
Well, that's incredible. And this is one of the themes that I was referring to. You are a breast cancer survivor. This story is about that and living life to its fullest. Also, you have dyslexia. Talk a little bit about that.
KO.
Mhm.
Dyslexia, I was discovered in secondary school. And it wasn't until I realized that the words move that I see the world differently. And my mum and dad were absolutely brilliant because they realized that I was intelligent, but there was something different. So they took me out and had me tested privately because the teacher at school refused. He just said I was lazy. And that was brilliant, as I say. So my parents, again, helped me through that amazingly. And dyslexia is just a different way of learning. We learn in more pictures and more sort of doing stuff rather than in the linear. And it's only shown up as a disability, I say, in the last 200 years because everything now is linear and the way we
Right.
learn is linear at school, which isn't particularly how human beings learn. So I don't class it as a disability. I class it as an ability, but it shows up as learning difficulty with the linear side of things. So yeah, it's been really difficult, and for a long time I didn't sort of shout about it, but I realised that actually it's very important that I do now stick my hand up. And again, there's a chapter in the book that changed my life and changed somebody else's life. I landed and there was a little girl that wanted to meet me, and she was dyslexic, and I suddenly realised that the adventure was taking on a whole different turn. And Polly Vasher is one of my heroes, and she very kindly wrote the forward to my book, and I'd picked her brains about long distance flying. And I said, what can I do in return? And she said, when it comes to the fact that you're the inspiration, you stand up and you be the inspiration. And I laughed and I was kind of like, I don't really know. And she said, you'll understand. And I realize now that I have the privilege of being that inspiration to other people. And the little girl that's given me the drawing is now doing really well in high school. And I get emotional about it. I try not to get emotional about it, but I do. And I'm unfortunately, they're having a big thing at the same time as the Croydon thing. So I couldn't go over there
Oh.
to Romania, but hopefully next year I'll go over and see them. And yeah, you just think, wow, I was doing this selfishly just for me. And then suddenly it touches other people. And, if I've changed one life, that's great. And if I've saved one woman from breast cancer, that's great. All those things, which is flying. Amy Johnson has inspired people to do much more than flying. And I think that's what people don't realize, that flying opens doors for other people in other ways. Not everybody has to fly, but it opens, just that dream and just that possibility and aspiration side of things.
So you had a reading that you were going to share with us. Why don't we do that?
Yeah, no, not doing things. So this is at the end. This is towards the end of the book, and this is the bit that yeah. Okay, here we go. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Engine failure. Turning downwind to land, I declare over the radio. Not a sentence I ever wanted to say in real life. Aksan is just falling out the sky. This is for real. Okay, options. I have about 3 minutes to make a crash landing. and it is looking like the water. Rhodes Airport is right next to the sea. That is a better option than ploughing into the hotels and people on the beach. Brace yourself, Amanda. You know you will survive, I'm telling myself. You have practiced engine failure, and this is not my first emergency that I've had in the Tiger Moth. No panicking, no time for that. Those next few seconds of flying will see how good a pilot I really am. You practice, of course, for emergencies in the air, and as a commercial pilot, you are sweated every 6 months in the sim. In fact, I think piloting is one of the most tested and retested professions in the world. Do doctors get retested after they pass their exams, or solicitors, for example? As well as practicing emergencies in the Tiger Moth, I have had 2 partial engine failures in that aircraft before during pleasure flights. No panicking is allowed as you're having to fly the emergency and calm the poor terrified passenger in the front. Actually, one passenger loved it as I managed to fly the poorly Tiger back to the airfield. Mayday. Pause. Say again? The astonished air traffic controller, I reply calmly again. Mayday, 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 engine failure, turning back, request land. Never words you want to say in your pilot career. Air traffic, like us pilots, trained for an emergency, but it sounds like her first real emergency. After realizing that I'm seriously in danger and falling out of the sky, the air traffic lady has a fit. Her voice goes up 3 octaves. So much for keeping calm in an emergency. Last time when I declared a pan emergency, they were calm and gave me a straight in. But this time I'm falling out the sky, where they can see me out the tower window from the other side of the runway. She confirms that I mean mayday. How many times? Yes, mayday, engine failure, request back, land on the runway. But need to land now, I reply. She starts shouting at the airliner on final to land. Go around, I say, go around. I'm very low and over the sea now, just under 150 feet, with nothing but water in front of me and Aksan. It's looking like I will have to land in the water, as from here I cannot land back if an airliner does not alter course. Aksan really does not have the height to be able to fly a normal circuit and come into land on the runway into wind. My only option for the runway would be to land with the wind behind me, which is never a good idea, as you have less control on touchdown. Turning back to land downwind is not routinely taught, and this is where pilots get themselves into trouble by not enough airspeed as they turn round. Remember the mantra, airspeed, 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 is what you must have to survive. It is scary when you're so close to the ground to have to put the nose down even further, looking like you're getting even closer to the ground to keep the aeroplane flying. Stalling this low to the ground is where the danger is, and you have no height to recover and will spin and crash. In an emergency, the only good landing is the one you walk away from. So get the nose down and pick the best fit place to land in front of you. That is the choice I'm making now. With the airliner on final to land on the runway, I brace for the sea, as there is nowhere else to go. Here we go, Aksan. Crash landing it is, I whisper to her.
Ooh-wee. That was a stressful scene.
It certainly was.
Yeah, and you had had lots of adventures before that you talk about in the book. You mentioned Polly Vasher earlier,
Yeah.
and we talked about Polly's book Wings Around the World.
Last
And
year.
yeah,
Yeah.
last year. And I was privileged to interview her, but even more privileged to when I was on holiday with my son in Europe, we came through the UK, and we had a really special lunch in which you and Polly and Mandy Hickson and our very dedicated book club members all came out, along with a young lady from the United States who has been working on her pilot career and path. She's still in high school here. She had gotten a copy of Mandy Hickson's book a couple years before, and so she got to sit with all of you. And it was the first time I had met you. We had maybe been on a few book club discussions, but we got to have a nice lunch together, and then an after party later in the evening at the Aviator Hotel, which was really cool. So that was like my first introduction to sort of getting to know a little bit about your story. And it's really special to be able to read your adventures in this book and then be able to talk to you and see you on book club meetings. It's just part of the warmth of this community, and the joy of it is connecting with people like you and getting to live vicariously through the things that you accomplished and this adventure especially. So thank you for sharing it with us. And let's get into that a little bit. So you when did you buy the plane and when did you start planning in earnest and how did that planning go? To talk a little bit about the pre-flight.
Yeah, sure. So I sort of made up my mind in about I don't know 2005 or something like that I was going to do it. And I was first going to just buy a Cessna and just do the route of Amy Johnson. Um, Unfortunately, I didn't. Fortunately, I didn't buy that airplane and do that, which is a whole nother story. But then I thought, do you know what? I'd started to fly the Tiger Moth, and I thought I really need to do it in a biplane. If I'm going to emulate and honor Amy Johnson, then I need to do it in a biplane, don't I? So I started saving up and looking all around, and then I had the opportunity to buy Axan in 2015. So I bought her then. I then had to do quite a lot of remedial work on her, as various things hadn't been put together by the previous engineer. Not sort of putting too fine a point on it, but yeah, so I had to spend the money that I'd sort of saved up on the trip fixing Axan before you go. Now, that isn't uncommon in the Tiger Moth world. It seems to be sort of par for the course. And then various things got in the way. And as I say, so my first attempt was in 2016, and I realized I'd have to cancel that because I needed to put the money into fixing Axan first. And then so I started saving up the money and writing off to sponsors. And now I had an aeroplane. I could say, well, I've got my aeroplane now. So therefore, you can have your logo on the side of the aeroplane.
Right.
Again, I don't know why, I just don't seem to be, I didn't get sponsors then. So I just carried on. And then my dad got ill. My nan died. My dad got ill. And I literally put my dad in the same nursing home that my nan had died from 6 months earlier when I came back from being diagnosed with breast cancer. Good year, I know. And this is it. You at that point you just put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
And the first chapter tells you all about that, and it literally, I thought, right, I now have to do it. So I sort of sat there in the hospital bed and I thought, if I actually recover from this and I'm able to fly again, because at that point my license, your medical is taken off you. And I thought, if I recover from the breast cancer and get my license back, even just my PPL, even my class 2 medical, then I'm going to throw everything at this and I'm going to do it because cancer is obviously trying to finish me off. So I knew breast cancer was going to be part of my life. My nan had it, my mum had it, my mum's still here. So I knew it was going to be part of my life, but not quite as young as I expected. So it was then. And so it took me sort of 6 months to get a plan together. And then it was very funny. It was actually then 2019 in January. Again, I sort of said it, and there was various permissions that I had to get, like India and Myanmar and places like that. And I thought, and the trouble is, if you're going to go for it, you've either got to go for it if you're not. And I hadn't got the sponsorship, I hadn't got everything put in place, but I just thought, do you know what? I'm actually going to do it, and I'm going to set it's the 5th of May to set off. So yeah, in that way, it was 5 months of then head down and planning. I'd sort of planned the route a couple of times, and you have to move the route with the politics and the war situation. But I wanted to keep it as close together. But then it's hard work, all the organisation of the planning and the permissions and doing all of that side of things, of which there was just 2 of us. There was me and my ex, and we just did all of the permissions ourselves. I rang up somebody who does, the same guy that had done all the permissions for Polly. I rang him up and he said, Amanda, you're a commercial pilot by the end of the thing. He said, save yourself the money and do it yourself. So I did.
All right then.
Yeah. So that was it. Yeah. So in 5 months, I would say you can plan an expedition of this while working full time.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible. And then you set off, and we'll let people read all of the details of that trip, but there are some highlights for sure. And and it was really fun to kind of follow along. It's fun to read these books, to read about. I've always talked about how reading is sort of like gives you an opportunity, a window into worlds that you wouldn't see or
Mm.
wouldn't experience yourself, maybe. But it's also fun when other people's adventures cross paths with places that I've had the luck to have visited. And thinking about your path through Europe to get down to Cyprus, and that experience there, I visited there last summer, and so I could kind of like follow along mentally along the map for a lot of the trip. Um, what were your favorite places that you visited, and why?
Oh, I mean, Romania was just phenomenal, which Amy didn't go to,
Uh-huh.
and I was invited to go there through a friend of a friend,
Okay.
and I kept saying no because I'd have to go over the Transylvanian mountains, and they kept saying no, 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 there's a route to follow, and I'm so glad I went there because they were just that. I think that was one of the pivotal changing moments of the adventure and of my life because that's where I met the girl with dyslexia, and that's where I flew down the old pass. Which, if I die tomorrow, I'll have that memory, in my brain forever. Flew past Dracula's castle. It has so many just amazing, and the people are just amazing there. So that was one of the places that was just amazing. Mannheim, Germany, one of the oldest airfields. They've got gliders landing beside you. Then you've got the grass runway. Then you've got jets and helicopters landing on your left side. And I was kind of like, wow. And again, that was a great reception. Just wonderful people, true spirit of aviation. Um, Cyprus was great again, even though it has all the connotations of being next to the war zones. That was another favorite place. And then, of course, Beirut. Beirut was just, they were just fantastic. And hopefully at the moment, all the people that I was with are still okay.
Good.
Yeah. And it's strange, isn't it? The places that are, have a more sort of, poorer, maybe commercial side of things are the people that know how to live life and they know how to embrace the sort of adventures and stuff. And I just and the thing that really shocked me out of this aviation was the people. I was doing it for the flying. I was doing it for the flying around the world. I love looking out the window. That's my whole thing of the flying and the physical flying. Those are the two things I love about flying. But I met these astonishing people that were so generous with their time and their food and their engineering and I just wow yeah you feel an adventurer when you start meeting with the people on the ground that are sort of um, have been through the same kind of thing and they were thanking me for saying about the breast cancer, small things. There's not anything written in Arabic about breast cancer, and they wanted me to sort of come and
That's
do
incredible.
a podcast about that to try and get that. And you never even think about this stuff. And again, it's a real privilege to do that kind of thing. And how on earth has that got to do with flying? But it ends up it has. So yeah, the people were just amazing.
So a lot of these things where you got to spend that kind of time with people were because they were planned ahead of time, but then some of them were because you were stuck places and you got to spend extra time with them. Did you imagine any of that before the trip?
No, I thought I'd be, um, like when you're stuck commercially, you're literally a dealing with the angry customers,
Right.
b dealing with the grumpy engineers that have got to come out and fix the aeroplane,
Right.
and just dealing with all the logistics of it. So I've never worked in big companies. I've always worked in small companies where you've had to do everything. So I've been cleaning the toilets out while the engineer's been fixing the front bit, that
Right.
kind of stuff. So yeah, it was amazing when you suddenly, and they want you to be experience the love of their country,
Right.
and show you these amazing things. Bablos, the place has been inhabited for what 7,000 years or something like that,
Yeah.
and that doesn't happen when you're traveling as a crew, as there's when there's two of you, and you're
Right.
in the commercial side of when you're in your uniform.
Hmm.
Um, that doesn't tend to happen. Things happen when you're a solo traveler. I think people are um, you get invited to more things. Suddenly,
Yeah.
I was being invited to all of these things, and it was, and as I say, it was incredible. Whereas I was just thinking I would just be filing all my flight plans and, changing the spark plugs and sitting there and sleeping on my days off.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you had great adventures, and you wrote about them so eloquently. And in that way, it reminds me a little bit of Jerry Mock's memoir, in which if Jerry Mock was notably the first woman to fly solo around the world in a single engine aircraft. And her book kind of reads like a cross between, a pilot log, but also a little bit of Home and Garden, which is a
Yeah,
a
yeah,
magazine here in the States. What they ate, what they talked about, the sites and that kind of thing. And so I enjoyed that aspect of it, getting to know the people along with you. So that was really wonderful.
yeah.
And you talked about, what you love about the flying. I haven't flown an aircraft like a Tiger Moth. I have pretty limited fixed wing time, but as a helicopter pilot, I think when you describe the actual hands-on flying, the kind of flying that you have to do, what it reminds me of is a helicopter that doesn't have an AFCS system, that it doesn't have like the magnets to hold the controls in place, and therefore if you let them go, you're not going to be flying anymore. Like
Yeah,
it's going to go and do its
yeah,
own thing, and it
yeah,
sounds like this aircraft is a lot like that. Talk
yeah,
about the flying.
yeah. The physical flying is the Tiger Moths, because they are 80 years old. These airplanes. Yes, they've been recovered and they've been, had bits added on them, but bits replaced in that. But essentially, they're 80 years old, so therefore they're full of character, which is what I love. But that means they're not um, perfect in their flying, because my bottom left wing was slightly twisted. It's okay, it's okay for flying, but it has a little bit of a pull to the right. You have to pull the stick to the right to keep and all Tiger Moths are like that. I've flown a lot of Tiger Moths now, and they all have characters, and you've all got to just learn their characters. There are very few that you can take your hands off and they'll just sit there. And that I like that part of it. However, when there's lots of turbulence and you're flying for 5 hours at a time, you do need a bit of a break. So I hadn't actually sort of comprehended that, even though I'd read that from Amy. I'd read the fact that she was exhausted when she'd flown for sort of 7 hours at a time, and it'd been
Yeah.
physical flying. I hadn't sort of really, really taken that on board, which I have now. And Polly had said the same thing. She had a very limited sort of, I think, sort of level holder, but a lot of hers was huge amounts of hand flying. And I don't think people that when you get there and you have all these crowds meeting you, you're kind of like, you want to just slurp out the airplane and go, I just need to sleep for 20 minutes, thanks.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's very physically demanding. But I think people think it's like you're sitting on an airliner going abroad. You're sitting there and you're going to get your magazine
Wind in
open
your
and read it and
hair.
do your hair, and and it's kind of like, I took bottles of water, but very, very I couldn't even sort of, I had the sweets were easier to get out while I was holding it with the knees. But yeah, drinking bottles of water was really difficult with just
Yeah.
the physicality of it.
I found that interesting that, when you were having issues with the turbulence or whatever, it was even hard to just change the frequency on the radio,
Yeah,
to navigate, and those kinds of things were a challenge. So it
yeah,
was real flying out there,
yeah,
like
yeah.
really rudimentary, exposed to the elements flying. Would you have done anything differently now that well,
Yeah,
we have, I don't want to spoil it, but
I'd pack my
just
thermals.
yeah, I don't want to spoil how this story ends, but like you obviously already mentioned, you didn't get there, and you
Yeah.
didn't get there not because of your flying, although the aircraft kind of decided to take a break on you on the way back, so that might have happened anyway on your
Mm,
journey across, but you were stifled by geopolitics.
yeah,
That was the
yeah,
thing that kept you, that was the
yeah,
wall
yeah,
between you and your
yeah.
goal. And there was nothing you could do about that. But what would you have done differently,
Well,
looking back on this trip?
I'm hoping to say, what will I do differently?
Okay. Okay.
So there is a slight possibility. I'm in discussion with a couple of major sponsors this time, which would be good.
Okay.
I'm rebuilding the aeroplane because book 2 will be how I tripped over a blade of grass in England, survive all the way to Beirut and back, and then trip over a blade of grass in England. So that's going to be, so I'm in the middle of rebuilding her at the moment, so that it should be bigger and better. Well, not bigger and better, but just going back to a timed zero engine, which will give me less of the engine problems. And I've been learning a lot more about the engineering just
Yeah.
so that I can tell the engineers what is wrong more, because Amy was an engineer and I realized that I needed to do that. So yeah, so and I will take my thermals next time.
Yeah, I was cold on your behalf. I was like, "Why are you doing this to yourself? This is a terrible idea."
I know, yeah, it was, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I'm down for all of it except for cold.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I'm normally the one who think I've bought myself a little waistcoat that's like a heated. It basically just keeps your core from freezing. So I take things like that now. So yeah,
Yeah, good call.
yeah,
Good call.
slightly more of those. Less socks. Don't worry about the smell. Just more heating stuff.
So you mentioned, and you mentioned this in sort of the afterword or whatever in the book, that we're gonna get we would call it your airframe and power plants mechanic license here, your engineer license. So how has that gone for you?
I haven't got the license, but what I
Okay.
have done is over the past year and a half is I've been learning a lot about it. So I haven't actually got the piece of paperwork, but I've been doing a sort of a year and a half of the physicality of it, which is because I'd still need an engineer to actually write the piece of paper, and I'd still need Matt to come out and actually bring the bits and fix the bits with me. But I can take it apart now so that I can tell him what bits need to be done, and I can do a lot more of the running side of things, and what Amy did, changing the oil, changing the spark plugs, changing all of that kind of stuff. So I'm much more better at keeping that side of the things going and learning how to patch up, little holes in the airframe and things like that, and spinner problems, and I was going to say nuts falling off, but that probably has a whole new different connotation. But yeah, so that's gone really well. That side of things. So now it's the nailing down a sponsor, because that's what I need. So that's what I'm doing now, and nailing down a documentary company to do that side of things again. So again, I'm in discussions with that side of things, which is quite exciting. And hopefully this will all build up to the anniversary of Amy Johnson. So that's going to be, in 100 years, in 5 years' time. But I'm hoping to do the flight before that, so that then people will see that, and then it can be part of the flight festival, which is going to be that whole year of all kinds of STEM and apprenticeships and scholarships and things. So I can come back and say, this is what you can do if you're really mad. I mean, if you're really determined.
I'm going to mark my calendar for that, and hopefully I can come
Yeah, please
and
do.
enjoy
Please
some of
do.
those celebrations in
Yeah,
5 years. I'm super
yeah,
excited about
yeah.
that. So, what would you say? So you had a couple of pretty hairy emergencies, and as we all know, like an emergency takes precedent at an international airport. And it doesn't matter where, like the emergency takes precedent. But I was thinking while I was reading this that, from the commercial side of things, it was very, very disruptive. And
Yes.
so I'm just wondering, like, what would you say to somebody who says, well, that's great that you have this dream, but what about the impact that it has on all of these
Yeah.
other systems? And is there a way to do something like this where where you wouldn't be in a position of kind of
Disrupting
exerting?
holidaymakers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I thank the people that had to wait, half an hour to land. The trouble is you have to land at customs airports. So the paperwork side of things is ginormous compared to what Amy Johnson had to do in the first Pioneers. They just landed and handed over their passport. Whereas I still have to land at a customs airport. So there was a little flying school, just over the hill from Rhodes, but I couldn't land there
Right.
because the customs officers wouldn't drive, 2 fields away. So you're always going to have that problem of the fact of you're still going to have to land at a customs airport.
Right.
And again, the thing that I'm mitigating from that now is having a better sort of working engine, a better side of
Right.
things of that, and doing more maintenance on it as I go down. So therefore, hopefully, and the oil side of things, I realize I've got to do boring things like send out a box of oil to the flying clubs rather than
Yeah.
just trying to rely on the oil that I can get.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's all those kind of little things. And what I could do now is hopefully land at the customs airport, do the customs, and then fly to the flying field one. And then I can
Right.
set off from that in the morning. So hopefully I can do that kind of thing. But yeah, I couldn't believe, as I say, I won't spoil it, but I couldn't believe that the emergencies happened at the same time. And they thought I did it on purpose. And trust me, you never have
Yeah.
an engine failure in an
Of
airplane
course
on
not.
purpose,
Of course not. No, that's absurd. So, why did you did the trip? What inspired you to write a book about it?
The book. So that's the dyslexic side of things. I always wanted, so my bucket list, as well as learning to fly, which I did, it was I wanted to write a book. So I wrote my first book, my little book, My Confessions of a Lady Pilot.
Confessions of a Lady Pilot by Amanda
Ooh.
Harrison.
Um, and it is titled so that it's a bit tongue in cheek, The Confessions of a Lady Pilot. And I always wanted to write a book that was on my bucket list. And I took it to different publishers and I went and chatted to them and I got chucked out the door from loads of publishers. And of course, Amazon, you can write your own book and publish it. So I thought, fine, that's what I'll do. And I had a talk coming up. So I do lots of talks. Strange that. I don't seem to stop talking. And I was doing talks about being a pilot anyway to encourage other women to fly. So I was doing that. And I had one talk coming up and it was just the time that Andy Murray was going through Wimbledon. And my TV broke. Go with me on this one. Because
Okay.
people say, how do you write a book? And I go, you have to apply the backside to the chair. And that it really is. You have to carve out the time. So my television broke and it was in Wimbledon. And we normally don't have an English person or even a Scottish person winning at Wimbledon. And I thought, right, okay, I'm not going to buy my television, a new television, until I've written the book, until I've finished
Oh,
my book. So
there you
rather
go.
than sitting down watching television at night, I had to sit down and write the book. And the reason it got written so quickly is because Andy Murray was looking like he was going to win. I had to write this book so I can buy the television. What's Andy Murray? And I literally made that bet with myself. And I bought the television on the Sunday morning and he won on the Sunday afternoon. And I'd written the book finished it about
That's
2 o'clock in the
awesome.
morning. But I spoke most of it and then I had it transcribed. So it's a
Mhm.
very, very different book, and I would say it's my kind of it's my kind of little school book, and then I have a grown up book, and I always wanted to be a published author. So the fact that I've done self publishing and published is fantastic, and this is the point. I mean, you can't see it, but I've got 2 bookshelves in here that are filled with all these books. Thursday's Child, Magnificent Women, Amy Johnson. All these fantastic books that inspire me all the time. And I've loved being part of this book club and will
Wow.
continue because, as you said, where do you find all these amazing women? And you've done that for us, Liz. You've and it's fantastic. So all I need to do is go, right, which book am I reading next month? And I've found these amazing women and all these engineers writing it and that. And I thought, yeah, so and I just thought I'd love to be one of those little drops in the ocean of actually doing that. So that was why I wanted to then have a written book. So I talked the first book, so it's
Mhm.
like a conversation, and then was translated. And then I should have paid more for the editing side of things. I
Okay.
might re-edit it and get it slightly better done. But then I actually wrote the second book because I wrote a diary. I often do write a diary, but I don't write it, today I did it. It's, it'll have things in it like Liz, um, sunshine, dog, So I just I let my dog and
Yeah.
I just write the bullet points, and then you have all the photographs, of course, these days. And
Yeah.
so then I sat down, and for the first documentary, I then had to list all the stuff doing it. So while I was writing all of that and listing all the stuff and what had happened and engine failure and all this kind of stuff, the book sort of wrote itself, and I ended up just sitting there, and I finished it during COVID, and it was that same thing, you know. You're not allowed to do anything else. You make the bet with yourself. You're not allowed to do anything else until you finished writing the book. And I wrote it, and I think it's a better book. I had a fantastic editor. The editor and the publisher, John Davies, is fantastic. Grub Street. He does all the military aviation, and he was looking for women authors because he's only got a couple, because of course they're all men. So, and Natalie, his editor, was brilliant. She didn't change that much, actually. I was amazed. I thought there'd be red crosses all over it, and but she kept it because she said, I really like your style. It's, people can really, fly with you, kind of thing. So yeah. This one was actually written. I've actually written a book. Wow. And as I say,
Well,
I'm halfway through the next published book. That'll be my third book, won't it? Flipping it.
Well, so I wanted to say, first of all, props to Grub Street and to Natalie. I mentioned that we had the opportunity to meet when I was in the UK, but I was introduced to you by Natalie. So Grub Street are tracking that, I'm kind of bringing all of these books together, and they reached out to me to let me know about your book. And so I actually invited her to come to lunch with us. I think she was otherwise occupied, but shout out to your friends at Grub Street, and thank you for, taking on these stories. So tell me a little bit about how that played out. So you knew you were going to, and I want to get to this documentary as well. We have not talked about that, but you do mention it frequently in the book, and I haven't had a chance to try to track that down, and I want to see it now. So first of all, with the book, did you know before you did the trip that you wanted to publish a book about it? Did you make that decision afterwards? And how did that relationship come to pass with you
I,
and Grub Street?
I think I wanted to do it. I think I wanted to, having self-published a book
Right.
and found it easier than I thought it was going to be. That sounds weird, doesn't it? But
You did it.
yeah, you did it. Yeah. So I knew I
Yeah.
could do it. So I knew I
Right.
could self-publish it again if I wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to write a book about the adventure, which again, which is why I was diligent of keeping a diary each night. And again, it just has to be bullet points. You don't have to keep a lot, because your brain then will remember it as the bullet points. So I was very diligent about that. So I thought, yes, I want to do that again. And I bought half of Grub Street's books. I
Yeah.
have a lot of their books on my thing, and it was around the air shows. And a great friend of mine had, I think, his fifth book published by Grub Street, and he introduced me to John. And well, what he did was, at the air show, he went, "You need to you need to publish Amanda's book." And John sort of looked at me and went, "Yeah, okay." And and he said, "Well, call me up." And this is where I'm good at being persistent, because I just kept emailing him, and I kept emailing him, and then I emailed him a chapter, and then I emailed him sort of like what I do to promote my book,
Mm-hmm.
and as soon as he read it, and this is the thing about publishers, they're so busy and they have so many books
Right.
on their plate, you have to just nail them down to read it. And I knew that I had something good here. Even though that's very non-English of me to say, darling, I've written a little book. If you'd like to buy it, it's great. But I knew I could sort of. Whereas you Americans are great. Hey, I've written this book. It's fantastic.
Trust me, I get those emails all day, every day from people whose books have nothing to do with women or aviation.
Yeah.
Oh, look at my great book.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. And this is it. But I knew if he read a little bit of it, and he read it, and I made sure I'd written it before I sent it, because I didn't want to have that pressure of the deadline of a publisher going, right, you've got to write it in, because I knew I wouldn't be able to do that. So I'd already written it. I'd written it COVID. And then it was sort of in 2021, we started chatting. And then it took me a year to nail him down. And then, as I say, once he read it, he went, "This is great. Yeah, I want to publish this book." And I was kind of like, yes. And he did actually say, well, the funny story is, he said, he took me to lunch and he said, right, do you actually read books? And I was kind of like, yes, I've bought quite a lot. Do you not remember me on your stall? And he said, well, how many books have you got? And I went, oh, okay. And I went, one,
Interesting.
2, 3. I said, I've got 7 bookcases. You really want me to go and count all of the
Did
books?
you like my inventory? Interesting.
And I love books. And being a dyslexic, I read a lot of old books because they're cream in colour. And I wanted this to be cream in colour, but he said for the first printing, we need to do it in
Ah.
white
And
because
why
that's
is cream in color important?
because it stops the words moving for
That's
me.
fascinating.
Because as dyslexic, when I look at white on black, it's like looking into a sunset. So you're sort of like doing that, and the words sort of
So
move.
crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
So cream is much better.
Interesting.
And I said, can I have it in cream? And my first book is in cream, and he said, no, for the first printing, it needs to be in black and white so we can make some money out of it, which is always a good thing. And then I can sort of do it in paperback and things. So I read a lot of paperback books. But now, of course, audiobooks, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. So I have it read to me while I still have the physical book, so I can track along and read the
Yeah.
stuff, but having it read to me as well, which is just, it's mind-boggling.
And
The things.
you have an audio version of this book that
Yeah,
is
yeah.
the reader is sort of this
Sasha, breathy
breathless.
person, breathy
Yes,
person.
just very energetic and just everything is with emphasis, and I loved it. I
Yeah,
absolutely loved listening to
yeah,
her speak. So, okay. So he's basically quizzing you on your reading acumen
yeah.
before deciding that you're
Not the
publishing
fact that
material?
I was dyslexic, just the fact of do I actually know what's involved in the book? Do I actually
Okay. Yeah.
uh, read books? Do I like military books? Do I actually, am I going to
Interesting.
be part of the book sort of
Right.
community?
Right.
And I was kind of like, yeah, it's and interesting enough, actually, I'm his first author that has sold out of my what is it, the forward, the advance in the
You
first
go,
2 months.
girl. Oh my goodness.
And I'm
Congrats.
also his first author who the audiobooks, because everybody said, why don't you read it? Why don't I read it? And he said, we have a contract with the American guys, so I have to give it to them first. And if they say no, then we'll get me to read it. And he said, yeah, but they picked it up on just a couple of pages that he sent. And they said, normally they have to have the whole book. So they picked it up straight away and said, yep, we're doing this one. So the audiobook
Ah,
was actually ready to be released before whatever it was, the
okay.
timeline. And that's again the first author. And Sasha wrote to me about it, and she said, I love your book. She said I had to stop several times because it got so emotional. And I
Oh,
thought, oh, that's great.
wow. That's incredible.
So, and he's really
That's
good
really
at,
special.
and this is it. You have, I thought they were quite scary with publishers, because the previous thing that I'd had publishers, we'd sat on a Zoom and they'd read a bit of my book and they're going, yeah, this is rubbish. This is absolutely, yeah, whatever.
Right.
Yeah. And I was kind of like, okay. And yet John is just fantastic, and we have a ball and we go around all the air shows selling the books. And
Well, that's really neat. What a great team. And as we were talking, I looked back and I saw that Polly's book was published by Grove Street.
Grub
So
Street.
that might have been the source of our connection. My connection with Natalie is when I was trying to track Polly down
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
interview her. I must have gone through them. And so, what was your relationship with Polly, and how did she come to write your foreword?
So I met Polly Vasher when she was doing her second round the world trip,
Okay.
and I was working for a TV company, and they were doing a documentary about her, and I got to meet her, and I got to say, are you doing any records on this? And because I'd been with the Air Racing, which is the records rallying uh, Association of England, so I helped her get sort of do the record side of things. And then Polly's very good at sort of getting you to do more of the logistics. When she did the flying around every single airfield in this country, I ended up doing some of that. But she was just fantastic, and I just, and she was so amazing, so generous with her time. She gave me, 2 or 3 nights where she invited me over for dinner, and we just chatted about long distance flying, and I just really, I just took sort of like, my list of 100 questions, and she was so generous in her time in that, and doing it. And she did all of her flying for Flying Scholars for Disabled
Right.
Flyers. So I ended up getting involved with that charity, of which I still have 2 best friends from. They don't fly, but they went on to rebuild their lives in an amazing way. So that's what the sort of like the Flying Scholarships for Disabled does. And I thought it was super nice that I could. They did a whole sort of promotion last year. So I gave some of the proceeds. I won't say profits from books, as you know, but some of the
Yeah,
proceeds
right.
from from the book back to Flying Scholars, which I sort of closed in the loop. And when we were discussing it with John, he said, I'll get Polly to write your forward. And I went, no, you can't ask Polly to do that. And he went, I'm going to. And she wrote me an email and she said, I'm thrilled. And she read the
Of
book and she said, that's
course.
amazing. So,
Of course.
and yeah, we're still in touch. And her and Peter are both such amazing people and so generous with their time and their sort of gifts for other people and that. And she's raised over millions of, for over
Yeah.
$1 million for Flying Scholars. And it's such a good charity. So in fact, they're going to be one of the stands at the Croydon thing for the Amy Johnson. So going forward, that will be part of it. And I mean, I think I've done, quite a good thing. But when you see somebody who has to use hand controls, land an airplane,
Right.
they don't have the decision of keep a little extra power, just to keep it, smooth it on. No, they have to take the power off because then they've got to use the other hand for the rudder because they don't have the
Yeah.
legs, So amazing stuff. So
Yeah.
so that's how I ended up. So I've known Polly now for a long time, and just such amazing people and so generous and wow, yeah. And I love it, the fact that she wrote that. So amazing.
I have one more question, but then I want to come back to a thought related to that. So, you talked about this documentary. Is it somewhere that we can see it? Where can we find the documentary?
We can't at the moment. I'm working on it.
Okay, so it was
Yeah.
never published.
No, it hasn't been published yet. I
Okay.
am working on it. It seems to have got stuck with with various things. So I am working on it to get it sort of at least out there on streaming, if anything.
Okay.
But
Okay.
so I'm trying to do that.
Okay. Wonderful. We will look for that. So the question that I wanted to ask you is, how has publishing this book affected your life?
Yeah, that is the biggest thing. So COVID and Brexit kind of
Mm.
said goodbye to my commercial career. And I sat, feeling really sorry for myself. And, I've run out of money with doing the trip myself and all the rest of it. And, and I'm kind of like, right, okay, well, that's it. The adventure flying's gone, the commercial flying's gone. What on earth am I going to do? And back to instructing, back to, minimum wage, only flying when it's, daylight hours and all that kind of thing. So it's been really tough few years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I had to turn down a jet job actually because I'm also looking after my mum. So I turned down a jet job, and the next day John signed on the publishing deal. And honestly, it has been a whirlwind of a year. I've met you, I've met all these other amazing people from the book club who've done amazing stuff, and I'm now friends with, and resurfaced the friendship with Polly. I'm now part of the Amy Johnson project. I'm being invited to do talking to inspire schools and inspire women, and so my life again has gone off on a complete 90-degree turn, but it just, I'm loving it. So from publishing a book, again, a selfish act. So I selfishly flew my Tiger Moth in honor of my hero, and wow, that did amazing things. And now I selfishly published a book because that was on my bucket list. And again, I'm getting emotional. And it has opened so many doors and so many wonderful friendships, of which I hope, Liz, you're one of them.
Absolutely.
And I just feel so privileged in the fact that I, if I can inspire people, because I honestly, I still am this ordinary woman who's done extraordinary stuff. And if I can publish a book, then other people get literally applying the backside to the chair. And so, yeah, it's changed my life amazingly. And I need at least another 24 hours in the day to do everything. But yeah, it's incredible. If you ever want to write a book, set yourself a time and just sit there and do it, because it's all good. I have to get over the English thing of, I've written a little book, and if you'd like to buy it, it's very nice. Thank you very much. I have to get over that, but
we
yeah.
help you. We'll help you with that. Yeah. We're happy to be here to help you with that. I want to tell you that what it does for me and for the community is that, well, so for me personally, I mean, obviously I've gotten a lot out of just this experience of finding this vast collection or vast canon of books that feature women in aviation that I had no idea existed and that continue to be published. And so that has been rewarding. And then, of course, these one-on-one interviews. But sort of more robustly, kind of what you talked about, the community of like, I now feel connected to the UK. I mean, it's only a few of you, right? But it's you, it's Polly, it's
So
our girl who
yeah.
wrote about she wrote about Beryl Markham, Mary S. Lovell. You know, I've who I really had hoped to see when I was there too, but she was off, you know, producing a mini series from one of her other biographies. Because, you know, but like, and then our book club members who live there, and who I've connected with, you know, I just feel connected to that history, and to the current community because you took the time to write your books and to publish them and have been so generous in, you know, participating in interviews and connecting with the book club community. So we really appreciate you, and I love your story. I'm excited about talking about it at the end of the month, because that's our really big conversation. And I just want to say to anybody who is listening, you know, the book club is open to anybody who wants to join. We're a very welcoming bunch, whether you have no experience in aviation or years and years of it. It does not matter. We're here to warmly welcome you and use the stories as sort of an icebreaker to share our own experiences. I also just want to take a moment, since you are such an advocate for dyslexia. First and foremost, you have resources of your own that you have provided. Do you want to talk about those really quickly?
I did a workshop thing that
Right.
I'm redoing, where I've got help for kids, and so I sort of made a thing of dyslexia. So yes, so I've done some of that, and it's a work in progress. But yes, to help sort of kids understand it a bit more.
And I want to mention that in our community as well, we have Elizabeth Wein, who is a widely published author who was actually contracted to write. She wrote 3 books that are set in historical fiction for young adult readers, that are for dyslexic and reluctant readers, very specifically. And so there's like a white eagle and something hawk. There's a collection of 3 sort of short form novels that are, you know, featuring women in history and in aviation, World War II stuff. So go check those out if you have people in your life who would benefit from that. And Amanda, is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we sign off?
No, I think just thank you very much for being part of it. And as I say, yeah, don't be scared if anybody's listening about trying something. You know, I've failed at everything and anything and keep failing, and that's the
Yeah.
point. But you know, occasionally you succeed, so you really can. If you want to write a book, just do it.
Or if you want to fly it to Australia.
If you want
So
to fly to Australia.
Let's see what happens this next time around. We'll be, you know, energetically supporting you and cheering you on, and we hope that you are able to achieve that dream.
Yay, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. Thanks so much for listening. If you want to hear more about Amy Johnson, check out the Literary Aviatrix Classics episode coming soon about her memoir, Sky Roads of the World, with guest hosts Jackie Boyd and Jenny Beatty. And if you love stories about vintage tailwheel aircraft flying, join us later this year when we discuss the memoir Bird by Tracy Curtis Taylor. In the meantime, blue skies and happy reading.